Okay, before we bring this meeting to order, I'd like to announce that we did have an executive session prior to this meeting involving personnel issues. Now I'd like to stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this meeting is a regularly scheduled meeting for official action when we will vote on matters which have been discussed in previous meetings. Tonight we will present proclamations to outstanding students. You'll see that they're coming in now. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it's necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 3 minutes. This limit will permit time for all of those who wish to speak to the board. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. Before we move on to proclamations, I'd like to point out on the cover sheet that Mrs. Terry Perkowski will be the liaison for elementary education with Mr. William Roman as the alternate. Tom Clemens will be the liaison to long-range planning, working with Dr. Bose. In saying that, I'd like to move on to item number 1. Recommend approval of the minutes of the 704th meeting held on 9/28/95 as circulated. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Roman. Questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Let's move on to number 2, proclamations. I'll turn it over to Mr. Weir.
As is our custom, we invite our outstanding students to attend this meeting and to receive proclamations in recognition of their accomplishments. The group of students you see standing before you tonight represent our North Penn High School commended students in the National Merit National Competition, our commended students. There are more, they're not all here. And we will have proclamations for each of them. Mr. Clemens will present these proclamations. I'll read the proclamation one time only. Whereas many North Penn School District students individually and collectively perform distinguished service to their school in many activities, and whereas the reputation and the image of the North Penn School District is built and enhanced by the performance of its faculty and students, and whereas the accomplishments of individual students in academic, artistic, athletic, leadership, literary, and musical endeavors bring positive community interest in school programs, and whereas the future of any community rests in the hands of its responsible youth, and then the student is named and the recognition is explained, National Merit Commended Student. Mr. Clemens, I'll invite you to go out here if I may, and I'll hand you the proclamations. I'll read all the names, realizing that some are absent. The first student to be recognized is Gregory Adams. Philip Bednar. Jesse Bernstein. Susan Biddle. Michelle Blake. Megan Boda. Karen Caravolius. Natalie DeMora. Mary Kay Guymond. That looks more like Christina Herbert. I'm sorry, you don't have the right one. I apologize. This is Christina Herbert. I know that Jean Sue is not able to be here, but her mother is here to receive this for her. Jean's mother, please. I don't see Mandy Jastrzemski. She's not here, right? And I don't see Christian Knauf. Aaron Malik. Michael McCree. Matthew McMillan. Lisa Morawski. Amy Moulton. David Pittman. I don't see Jonathan Roth, so this must be Jenna Schultz. Joel Snyderman. Beth Staples. Jennifer Streelman. Valerie Sutton. David Sweeney. Peter Wise. Carolyn Yen. Carolyn, when you return to the line, will you just ask everyone to follow you around here again so we can see you once again and recognize you all? Thank you. To lead the prayer.
Okay, we'll give it a minute to clear out.
Okay, I think we can move on now to special report, Merck Institute for Science Education.
Mr. President and members of the board, I'm pleased to introduce three individuals that will give us a report on a unique experiment and a cooperative venture between a giant in the pharmaceutical industry and we're one of 4 public school systems with which this partnership has been formed. As somebody who used to work in Rahway, New Jersey, and learned early on in the 1970s that Merck was a very good corporate neighbor, I'm glad to see now in the 1990s that Merck still is a very good corporate neighbor. It has offered the North Penn School District an opportunity to develop a better capacity to teach science education by teaching children through informed and more highly skilled teachers how to use a scientific method themselves. And so what we expect to accomplish is the development of a cohort of teachers who are more highly skilled and who are prepared by way of this experience provided by the Merck Institute for Science Education to be better science teachers. And the director of that program is a good friend to North Penn and to the public schools involved in this project. Dr. Carlo Paravano is both a scientist himself and an educator, a good combination. He's going to provide the introduction to us of what this program represents, and then his colleagues and my colleagues, Dr. Donna Brown and Mr. Dave Deckard, will tell us how this project is working in our own schools. Dr. Paravano.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate this opportunity to provide a progress report on this really very, very exciting partnership. As many of you know, Merck, through both official corporate actions as well as the activities of many of its employees, has long been a very, very strong advocate for high-quality science education. In 1992, Merck undertook a rather extensive review of its activities in the education area, and as a result of that review, decided to take a more focused and proactive approach in the improvement of science education. In order to carry out the mission of Merck, what the corporation did was create the Merck Institute for Science Education. The Institute is a separate non-for-profit organization. It has 501c3 status and was officially launched in 1993. Now, I think probably the most important word to describe the Institute is the word focused. The Institute is focused on K through 8 science education. And I think it's very important to realize that that is a very, very major shift for a corporation in terms of its educational partnerships. Because up until that point, Merck, as many other corporations, has mostly been focused on graduate, undergraduate education. So the first point I'd like to make is that the mission of the Institute is to improve science education in grades K through 8. Another important focus is that the Institute is focused on a very small number of school districts. Again, instead of Merck being involved in a wide variety of school districts around the country, it felt that its work could be most effective if it worked with a small number of districts. These districts were chosen on the basis of where Merck has its major operations. We work with 3 districts in New Jersey, Rahway and Linden, which are around the Rahway site. We work with Reddington Township, which is around Merck's corporate headquarters in Hunterdon County. And the 4th district is North Penn, which, as many of you know, is around the West Point site. Another important focus is that our programs are focused on teachers. We really do not have very many programs. We do not sponsor many activities that are focused on students. But we believe that long-term change comes about if we can create very, very enthusiastic, creative, and competent teachers. So if we are talking about reform of the education system, we feel that it is most appropriate for us to work with teachers. Another important focus is on the technical assistance that we feel we can provide the school districts that we are working with. Again, in the past, most business education partnerships have focused on the financial aspect. While financial resources are very critical, the technical assistance that we can provide to the school district, we think, is really very, very valuable in bringing about long-term change. And my final general point about the Institute is that what Merck did in creating the Institute was to make a long-term commitment to these 4 school districts. Again, if any of you have been, involved in business education partnerships, many of them are interested or focused on one aspect one year, another one another year, and so on. But Merck has made a 10-year commitment, and I think that's a very strong signal to you that we know that change is difficult and it does not happen overnight. But we plan on sticking to this partnership for a very, very long period. Now, one of the first things that I did when I arrived at Merck 3 years ago was to develop a strategic plan. And I'd be happy to share details of that strategic plan at some other time, but for our purposes tonight, I think what is really critical is that I relate to you what our philosophical underpinnings are. In other words, what are the threads that run through all of our programs? Well, the first very important thread is that we feel that science education is essential for all students. It's no longer adequate for us to train the 5 or 10% of the students in math and science that are going to go on in careers in math and science. But we feel that it is very, very critical to offer to all students a very high-quality science education. The second philosophical underpinning is that we feel that children learn science most effectively through an inquiry-centered approach. And that is really another way of saying that science is best learned by doing science the way scientists do, and that is by actually doing it. The third point that I'd like to make, and it's one that I've already mentioned, and that is that teachers are key to change in the education system. So again, many of our programs are really involved working with teachers. And the fourth philosophical underpinning is that we have a very dramatic underrepresentation of women and minorities in the math, science, and engineering fields. And as a result, many of our programs are aimed at improving that situation. What do we do? Well, I think our programs are best summarized if I outline 4 different program areas. The vast majority of our time is aimed at developing professional development programs. And in fact, in a few minutes, you will hear about our first major professional development program. The second program area involves a resource center. What we have done at our headquarters, which is in Rahway, is brought to the attention of teachers the results of nationally acclaimed curriculum projects. So what we have are literally hundreds of curriculum modules, books, activity guides, and so on that teachers can come examine, borrow, bring into the classroom. They bring it back to us. We refurbish them, we put them back on the shelf, and they can be lent out once again. This program has been really very, very successful, mainly because resources are rather scarce for elementary school teachers. And so what we have done, I think, is provide them with a very, very rich resource of materials. Another area that we're involved in is pre-service, and that is working with undergraduates who are studying to be teachers. We think that a great deal can be done to better align a student's undergraduate study with what he or she is going to face in the classroom. So we are working with schools of education to develop different programs for teachers who are going to, or for students who are eventually going to teach at the elementary level. And then our final program area is systemic, or is support for systemic change. So we're really very active in the establishment of national and state standards. I think what I would like to do now is to allow my colleagues here to make some remarks. But before I do that, I think that I would like to highlight one very important change, and that is that you'll notice that I'm joined here by Donna Brown and David Decker, and you might think, what is Mr. Decker doing here talking about a science initiative? Well, I'm very happy to report that we have enlarged the scope of the initiative over the last several months to include mathematics. We're not going to change the title of the institute, though. It would tend to get a little bit unwieldy. It already is right now. But I think that signals a very, very important crossroad for us, and we have included mathematics. So at this point, I would like to ask Donna to talk about the work of the Institute from the standpoint not only of a science supervisor, but also from the standpoint of a very, very key person in the district. Donna?
One of the key words that Carlo mentioned was focus. What the Merck Institute has helped us to do as a district is to focus on a new vision for science education. To not only focus on the vision, but to implement it in our classrooms. And that's what we've begun the process of doing. We are implementing inquiry-based learning within our classrooms. It's a natural outgrowth for us. At the same time we became involved with the Merck Institute for Science Education, we were beginning our curriculum review process for science. So this was a natural beginning for all of us. At the very start, one of the things that the Merck Institute helped support was the sending of a team to the National Sciences Resource Center to bring back information on leadership and change in science education for our district. That helped get everybody's mind on board and to share a vision that we would soon implement. We started with 2 elementary schools investigating inquiry-based education through the support of Merck. We quickly expanded to all of our elementary schools, including all 13 this year. We have also, in conjunction with providing materials for instruction, have provided in-service training for all of our teachers on every unit that we implement. The Science Review Committee has both supported and endorsed all of the curricula that we have been putting into place. At the same time, we found that just like the Merck Institute for Science Education established a resource center in Rahway and is establishing a satellite resource center here at West Point, we needed to establish our own resource center within the district so that we could resupply the materials that teachers need. In addition, we will be supplying additional resources so that teachers can call us when they need some things that they would like to supplement in terms of instruction. One of the other things that we have done is to expand the role of our Merck partners, our Merck volunteers from the West Point site in our schools. We started last year by targeting pilot schools to begin the process. And now I'm very happy and proud to say that we have volunteers associated with each of our schools, K through 8, who will be working with teachers to help increase the level of instruction. One of the other things that David will soon be telling you about is the development and implementation of the Leader Teacher Institute. For us, as I told you before last spring when I came here before you, this represents a quantum leap for us in terms of professional development. And as Carlos said to you, that's truly the key to systemic change. Teachers are one of our greatest resources in reaching our children. So by providing training to teachers, we go the next step. We go the next round. In brief, I might summarize by saying that the Merck Institute itself is a resource. That's helped us to execute our program on an accelerated timeline and on a greater level of depth. Without them, I wouldn't be here right now to report on this extraordinary progress in 2 years. This is my 3rd year here, and we've seen tremendous progress thanks to the help of the Merck Institute. And we look forward to this continued long-term partnership. In taking us to the next level, we've moved to integrate ourselves with mathematics. So we now call ourselves Science and Math through Technology. And at this point, I'd like to ask David to give you some more of the perspective on the Leader Teacher Institute.
You've heard the word institute mentioned in a couple references here tonight, and so I'd like to describe one of those institutes, which is a Leader Teacher Institute, by first contrasting that with the Merck Institute for Science Education, which is a place in Rahway, New Jersey, has a staff member, has offices. The Leader Teacher Institute was an event. It took place this summer with 58 of our teachers participating in hands-on inquiry-based learning in a summer format over a 3-week period. During this year, you will see follow-up of that. They will participate in a number of days, working Saturdays and other days during the school year, some within their buildings and some as district-level participants. I am proud to be part of this. In a way, I represent the entry of mathematics, as both of my colleagues have mentioned, and for us represent a venture for advancement of mathematics curriculum because of this association with the Merck Institute. Now, I mentioned that we had 58 of our elementary or K-8 teachers participate in this. They're assigned to school teams, or they originated with school teams. So each of the 15 schools in the district has on average about 4 representatives, with the middle schools having a larger number of teachers involved. During that summer institute, they developed, or it was dedicated to the development of in-depth understanding of math and science through this inquiry-based approach. Now, when they were there, they participated in one of 3 strands. The structure of those strands was one called the Earth, the other called the interdependence of life, and the third called the structure of matter. So teachers concentrated during the initial year in that endeavor and were educated or were instructed by specialists in those areas. The math component was integrated throughout each one of these strands. So, for example, when life sciences studying genetics, topics in probability and combinatorics were the related math items. Earth science teachers used proportional thinking and mathematical modeling to enrich their content. And in the physical science strand, science and math are difficult to separate, since ideas like variability and reliability of measurement, interpretation of data through graphical analysis, items such as those are hard to determine which exactly study they are, mathematics or science. All the content were developed through hands-on investigations, and teachers did things like modeled cratering on the moon, applied dilution techniques to understand ideas of solubility and pH, investigated conditions affecting bacterial growth. So with this hands-on, in-depth study, our K-8 teachers developed more of an understanding of the mathematics and science of these specific strands. So as I mentioned before, the teachers in the follow-up year will be involved with activities throughout this school year to continue their own development as well as continue their influence as teacher leaders in their school. In future years, teachers, and next summer and the summer following, since this is a 3-year commitment for them, our teachers will be involved with the strands they haven't participated in this year. Overall, their role will be to develop their understanding and additionally to promote math and science through technology. That represents a description of the Leader Teacher Institute, and Dr. Paravano has some closing thoughts.
Okay. I just, as one of my closing thoughts, I just wanted to say that I've been involved in a fair number of professional development opportunities, and I can categorically say that this past summer was really the best one from a variety of standpoints. And I think the reason for that was the participants. The participants really made it that way. And I think that all of you can be extremely proud of the teachers who participated, as well as the instructional team. It was an enormously satisfying experience. And I was really very pleased to see several of the board members there. And we certainly appreciate your support. My second and final comment has to do with how this, we keep referring to inquiry-centered and inquiry-based hands-on science. What do we really mean by this? As Dr. Bose said initially, prior to coming to Merck, I was a teacher. I spent nearly 20 years as a teacher. I'm a chemist. And one of the very important concepts that I taught year in and year out has to do with phase changes, and that is when material goes from gas to a liquid to a solid. And as that happens, there's usually a transfer of energy. I taught a college course, and I would show this year in and year out using overheads, giving thermodynamic data, and the students would remember it just until the next exam, and that would be it, right? One day, a very good colleague began to work with high school teachers in the area, and a high school teacher rather cautiously said, because it's not usual that high school teachers tell college teachers how to teach, said, Carlo, I think there's another way to do this. There's a demonstration that you can try. And he showed me that if you have a supersaturated solution of sodium acetate, you have it in a large flask and you pour it over a small seed crystal, you get a very, very large mound of crystals, and that liquid goes to a solid. If you touch that solid, it's very, very, very hot. So I would pass this around to the class, and they'd see phase change, heat transfer. Well, fortunately, someone has made it possible for us to do this demonstration at school board meetings. So I would like to do that right now, with your permission. Okay.
How much
If you could...
She was ready. She was ready.
Yeah. Okay, if you could just hold on a second. Just hold these in your hand for just a second. Now, this is not the way that I would do this with a second grade class, right? Because what would they do right away? They would touch it, they'd tear this apart, and so on. So we need to do this in a slightly different way right now. But what I'd like you to do is to take what is inside the pouch out. And I'd have a class of students work with each other and kind of describe to each other what you have there. They would use words like it's clear, what its temperature is, its room temperature. Does it look like water in there? No? I hear no. What does it look like? It's a little thicker. So we would go on. In the interest of time, I'm going to move this along a little bit, but I would have them describe to each other what's in here. Now, what I would like you to do, you notice that there's a metal disc. Grab the metal disc, one half of the metal disc with thumb and forefinger, and then grab the other half of the metal disc with the other thumb and forefinger and snap that disc just a couple of times. Snap it just a couple of times.
Oh, yeah. It's a hand warmer. Oh, yeah. Take this to the football game. You can warm your hand.
Okay, now, what has happened? We have gone from a liquid to a solid, right? There's been a phase change. Has heat been transferred?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Absolutely tons of it. Now, if you do this in a class, will the students ever forget that? No. Absolutely not. We have done science. This is exactly the way we try to do it in the classroom. Now, the nice thing about these are called hand warmers. As you can imagine, they do more than warm the hands. These are pretty, but you can regenerate these. You can regenerate these. We actually have a variety tonight. We have some that can be generated in the microwave oven, and some which need to be boiled. So I caution you, this is my first presentation with microwavable ones. One guess who got the microwavable ones. We'll provide everybody with some. But students ask, how many times can you do this? So I say to them, go home and try it. The next day they come back, so I ask for answers, and one child raises his hand, says, I tried it 137 times. Why did you stop? My mother told me to stop. How long will this last? How long will it last? Well, it all depends on whether it's outside, in your pocket. So you begin to ask questions. What do you mean when it's over? So students will get a sense of the accuracy of scientific data. Because one child, this will be over at a very different time than other children. I sometimes ask them, take one home, you bring it home and put it on a tabletop. Somebody else bring it home and put it in a pocket. And a third person put it in the freezer. And I will always get a phone call from the mother of the child I told to put it in the freezer because she's been opening it every 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carl, would you take questions, Carl?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, we'll start on
Just wanted to follow up on the theme that Dr. Paravano mentioned about actually getting your hands on and actually trying this and visualizing it and seeing it and doing it is the way that science is actually conducted. It occurs to me as an afterthought after visiting the Leader Training Institute this summer and seeing the degree of enthusiasm and the many projects from all of the teachers that participated in that perhaps a picture would be worth 1,000 presentations. And I'd like to recommend to the board that perhaps next summer when the Institute is in session once again, that we use Channel 16, NPTV, to create a documentary on that so that we can actually begin to see some of the projects and hear testimony from the teachers that participate.
That's excellent.
We'll stay on this side. Bill?
I have a question. What process is in place, if any, to have those that attend the Leader Institute spread it to the teachers that did not, so that we don't have this problem in the elementary school of one teacher having all this great information and others not having it?
We've already begun that sharing process. And in fact, leader teacher teams within their buildings are bringing the word and the practice to their colleagues. Tomorrow there will be 2 sessions, one at Culp Elementary and one at Knapp, in which leader teacher teams will be actually modeling inquiry-based instruction for colleagues. So the word will be continuous throughout the year and throughout the 3-year process. In addition to that, the Merck Institute has planned 1-week institutes for peer teachers, so that there will be no question that everybody will be on board and involved.
Will this process, of what we're learning in the Leader Institute, become part of the Goal 1 program and institutionalized at North Penn, so that we don't depend on the teacher to decide to do it or not do it?
Right. It will be an integral part of that. And in addition to that, what teachers are learning is that inquiry-based instruction is really very broad-based and is part of any curricular area.
Thank you.
Any other questions from this side? You go to this side.
Just 2 questions, Doctor. The financial commitment Merck has made to this district to date, would you just know that offhand?
Donna, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, the financial commitment Merck has made to this school district to date, in roundabout figures.
Donna, do you want to, before you answer, let me just say that that's a little bit difficult to say because our salary, I mean, for example, much of what we do at the Institute is directed to the work at the Institute, so directed to work with the district. So, for example, there are 6 staff members at Merck, and so when you ask for the financial commitment, I don't know whether you mean, do you include that as well or not? In terms of actual funding, I think Donna can respond to that.
Right. If you remember from the very beginning, the commitment started with about 1/3 portion of the total budget being the district and 2/3 the Merck Institute in the first year. Because this is a partnership means that each side begins to increase its level of participation so that we come closer to a 50-50 ratio. We are still at the point in time where the Merck Institute is contributing the majority of the funds. At this point, we're about 40% district, about 60% Merck Institute. And remember that their very, very large contribution towards professional development of our teachers is considerable.
Can I get a dollar figure?
We're talking over $200,000 this year.
And Doctor, last question. Under D, Institute Program Areas, you had made a quote that the resources are scarce for elementary school teachers. Is that a generality or is that a finding here at North Penn?
That's general throughout the country.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's true.
Very much.
Okay.
Any other questions from this side? Okay, you can't leave yet, Doctor. Oh, Terry? Yes.
Dr. Parvano, I got last year's or 2 years ago or whenever we got
okay.
this. And I have been very impressed by what Merck is doing, and I really would like to thank you personally and Merck for all their efforts toward the school district's science and math education. I think it's great. I hear, like at back to school night, the teachers are telling us about the butterflies and the seeds and all that, and it's really neat to see this hands-on stuff that they will remember and they can see the practical application. Thank you.
And I think it's important to indicate that we're very pleased with the way the partnership has progressed as well.
Thank you.
Very happy.
Any other questions from the board?
Just
Okay. Oh, Carmen?
Hi. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask what's happening at the secondary level.
There's
My
a lot.
last time, guys, again, Jim.
I know, Carmen, thank you. A lot is happening at the secondary level, and we will certainly report to you those results at a different time. Tonight was the focus on the Merck Institute and the K-8 program.
Is
But we
that
will report
going to
you.
be, are we going to try to do another foundation type of funding for the secondary level, or are we going to try to do it
Not at this
ourselves?
point in time.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, turn it over to Dr. Bose. Can't leave yet. You need to stay here.
We have a presentation for you, Carl. If you don't mind stepping forward, I want to read this for our guests and the board, and then give it to you with the writing of fellowship. It's to Carlo Faravano from the North Penn School District for his dedication to the partnership between the North Penn School District and the Merck Institute for Science Education, and for his commitment to the improvement of science education. We thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the committee report section. First, facilities, buildings, and grounds. Mr. Allen.
No report.
Any questions on for Bill? Okay. Move on to community services and policy. Carmen Leahy.
No report.
Any questions or comments? We'll move on to elementary education. Terry Perkowski.
During October, the district began the English reading and writing standard curriculum review process, and this, of course, will impact elementary education, but I have no further details at this point. That's the end of the report.
Okay. I do believe there was a meeting last
There was
week.
a meeting.
Yes. Okay, any questions or comments of Terry? Hearing none, we'll move on to secondary education. Ralph.
No report.
Questions? Okay, we'll move on to special education and student services. Terry Perkowski again.
No report.
Move on to support services. Donna Mangle.
No report.
Okay, Dennis, as you all probably can see, Dennis is not here tonight. We'll move on to finance. Vicki Sherrill.
Yes, I'd just like to mention that there is a item on BA2, item 6E. It's dealing with transfer taxes that must be refunded because they were found exempt from the Enabling Act. Just so you're aware, and for anyone in the audience, there is an attachment that explains that. It's basically out of our hands in that they were not a proper tax for us to assume, although one is being returned at 75% with 25% still remaining with the district nonetheless. I'd also like to inform you that in speaking with Dennis, they're pretty much wrapping up the audit, although he expects us to have it within the next couple of weeks, 2 weeks in our possession. It will most likely be scheduled for December, the December committee meeting for a presentation by the auditors. If possible, that may be adjusted, but I do believe it should go through the committee meeting so that we have time. If we have any follow-up questions for the auditor, I prefer that approach to it. I'd also like to say that perhaps that would be the appropriate time for myself and Dennis to also bring forward an end-of-the-year report on finance. So I would like to request that we give some consideration at that time, and perhaps accompanying that meeting, which wouldn't directly involve the auditor himself, to some considerations of changes that we might like to see coming forward in the next year's budget, so that we don't find ourselves getting so far down the path that it's too late to make any kind of user-friendly changes, and give Dennis advance notice through our collective discussion. Also, I'd like us to give some consideration to a discussion regarding zero-based budgeting and making accommodations for a transmittal sheet that would explain not only the new tax dollars in the future budget, but also the recurring taxes that are collected for one-time expenses, which traditionally haven't really been accounted for as new spending, but are in fact, creating and being used for a new use in the upcoming year. And some talk regarding a detailed systems review, which would be similar to an audit but at a deeper level. So those are areas that I'd like to see us accommodate. And Mr. President, when you feel that it's most appropriate to place those on, I would appreciate that.
You have a question?
Okay.
As far as the December works, we called a committee meeting. We're talking the December work session as far as the audit, that we think the audit would be
That's
ready.
when,
But
at
you'd
this
like to
time, we're
package
anticipating-
it together with Dennis, some of these
To
other
allow some
suggestions.
discussions, right, I'd like to, because that is traditionally also when adjustments are made, if there's reorganization and any changes in liaison positions. And I personally would like to follow through, having, completed that year, to give a report of those areas that I've encountered through my connections with Dennis, and what I'd like to see for recommendations of improvements. And Dennis has some himself, I'm sure.
Bill, I think you had a question.
Yeah, this audit, Vicki, is this the one from the Department of Ed or the private auditors that we hire?
The audit that we'd be receiving is the local audit.
Okay.
The state audit usually comes through in the spring. This one is Maley and Falconero on the local audit.
Do you have anything else to report, Vicki?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, any questions of Mrs. Sherp? Okay, I'll work with Dennis on preparing that for the December work session. Okay, hearing no questions, move on to personnel. David Whites.
No report.
Legislative, Carmen Leahy.
There are some bills out there, but nothing has really moved. The Senate is looking at the possibility of passing the House bill that was introduced by Representative Gladdick for the non-strike binding arbitration, and that is meeting with some opposition at the Senate level. So we'll keep an eye on that and get back to the board.
It did get through the House.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there might be some questions. Do you have anything else to report on that, Carmen?
No, not really, other than just a little note that Governor Ridge just signed a 25% increase for his cabinet members, so there goes a campaign promise that went down the drain. Real quick. That's all.
Okay, questions. Vicki?
Carmen, do you have a copy of the binding arbitration bill as it now stands, as it passed through the House?
No, not with me, but I can get a copy of it.
Yes, I'd like us to acquire that through any of our local representatives. And I'd also like the board to give consideration as to whether we do in fact want to formulate an opinion and perhaps a resolution, sharing our opinions and giving some direction to our state representatives on how we feel about this. Some of the other districts have passed resolutions stating their opinions, which happen to be that they oppose mandatory binding arbitration as a
well, the PSBA has come out very strongly on that. Montgomery County School Board from the State Legislation Committee have also come out against it. Unfortunately, the realism is that given the current economic and environment in this in Pennsylvania, that it's going to be very difficult to defeat. Very, very difficult.
Well,
But
that's,
we should give some
But
thought.
certainly-
is
that
that,
if we
would that
do
be
wanna-
something else, or something we could put on a work session to talk about?
Sure.
November.
It's
What
just a
about-
consensus.
Right,
that
to
you
get a
really need
census,
to-
but we
to
could
decide that.
write up a
And first, we need the bill.
proclamation or a,
We each need the bill to read, and then we can decide.
We'll get a copy of the bill too.
That's a
Okay.
good idea.
well, let's get that
Put on your
scheduled
November
for
agenda.
the November work session. Okay. Anything else?
Nope, that's all.
Questions? Okay, we'll move on to North Montco Technical Career Center. Ralph?
Yes, to report, I'm not sure if last month some of this information might have been reported, but the enrollment this year is at 910 students, 441 of whom are from North Penn. A goodly number of those, I think it's something over 100 this year, are coming from Penndale. They're ninth grade students who spend a couple hours there in the morning in a survey course. Also, because of the enrollment, which is over 900 and growing, the VOTEC board is looking at alternatives to expand that facility to accommodate the additional growth. Proposals on that will come back to home boards, which would have to take any action. Those proposals would be back to North Penn in December or January of next year. The good news, if any costs that would be associated with the expansion are based on the assessed valuation of the 5 districts, and at the current levels, our share of any cost would be 39.88% versus the other budgetary items are based on enrollment, where we're between 45 and 50%. So any costs will be much less than the ratio of value we get out of based on our students. That's the end of the report.
Any questions?
Ralph, did they formulate that off of the updated assessment information, or sometimes they rely on last census figures rather than may not have the reassessments we're dealing with?
Information is based on information from the PSBA Research Department as of September 11th, 1995.
Okay.
That's
I just wondered if Dennis could be of any assistance in updating that. Would it be possible, though, that this could be coming through and be affected by the reassessments? In other words, the future bonds, you're talking about really the bond debt. That would be
You're
mostly...
talking about bond debt and the each district's share
Sharing
of that bond debt's
through
based upon
valuation.
when you take the bond, what the, and I think they're talking about the proposal would be something that they'd want to do if they're going to buy, if it's going to come out to a bond, it would be next year they'd be looking for it. We're trying to get it out in December if we can, or January, so they could be, people can consider it in this year's budgets, this coming budget.
Any questions here? Any more questions this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the Merck Science Partnership. David Whites.
Other than the fact that my hand warmer is
still warm?
transferring significant amounts of energy, I have no additional.
No report.
Okay, does anybody have anything under other assignments? Okay, hearing none, I do. I'd like to call your attention to item BA2, or I'm sorry, page BA2, item 6B. Later on, we'll be asked to vote on to create a long-range planning process, and I would just ask that the board would support that. Any other items? Other assignments? Okay, hearing none, this concludes this part of the meeting, and we will move on to item number 5, audience of citizens. Sir? Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. I'm Bill Taylor from Lansdale, and before I get into 2 questions and 2 comments, I want to say that there's no one behind this dais that doesn't occasionally surprise me with a bright flash of insight. I don't know how closely the public watches, but in this, we just can't rely on any of you to stay in any particular set. You keep on rising up above it. That's intended to be an inspiration also. I've been wondering frequently, as you all have, I'm sure, why it takes so long to get some things done, why we talk so much and nothing much comes out. And with apologies to the North Penn reporter and the rabbi, whose thoughts are similar to mine, but not quite the same, partly it's because we can't expect things from each other when our words don't match. If one person doesn't think something is a sin, they're never going to confess it. And this is easy to identify there, but it applies just as much to cans, beans, and hand warmers. Just as a point. I mean, it might be that the board might consider communication training among itself as a discipline run by an expert from somewhere else, so there's no bias. Secondly, a previous board decided the math was too difficult to keep track of representational elections. So we dropped having school board members from Hatfield Borough and things like this. Consequently, all of you represent the whole school board and nobody represents anything in particular. That's a case of skipping hard homework. Now, another possibility of that may be the current argument for referendums. When you consider the cost of a referendum and the time to conduct one, it's not only, I consider it, irresponsible act to call for a referendum when you're elected to make these decisions, whatever they happen to be, but it's also extraordinarily impractical. And it's just another excuse for not doing homework. On the question of crowding, is it possible and honorable to manipulate the scheduling of the VOTEC plan so that, in effect, each class seat in the high school holds 2 students? And lastly, do we have any plan at all in place to protect us against the effect of either the fact or the rumor of a decline in the quality of our education here as caused by, for example, hasty economies that may take a couple years to recover from? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Greg Anderson, 308 Abbey Lane, Lansdale, Montgomery Township. As you mentioned, Mr. Clemens, topic B on the superintendent's report tonight is the approval of a long-term planning process, which is a good and necessary and long-neglected idea, in my opinion. With the generous assistance of a long-term attender of school board meetings, I was alerted to a report from 1987 about the response to projections of enrollment growth at that time. Yes, it was a problem even way back then. I hear often that the PEL numbers cannot be trusted, so I looked at their projections from 1987 to see how well they hold up in retrospect, and this is what I have found. This year we have, on an actual basis, 2,548 students in the high school. In 1987, the PEL projected that number would be 2,474, a difference of only 74 or 25 per class. Next year, if we hold true to form, we will have 2,650 in the high school. The PEL's projection had been 2,683, which is a difference of 33, and I consider it to be dead on, assuming minor growth from now until this time next year. Wouldn't we all like to be able to see so clearly 8 years into the future? I raise this because I have heard repeatedly that we don't need permanent solutions to temporary problems. The current PEL projection says we will have 14,000 students by 2000 and stay above that level through 2005, the last year of the study. This is not a temporary problem, nor is it a problem of the school district's making. But we must be realistic. Growth often requires painful choices, and that pain must be shared to some extent by taxpayers with and without children in the schools. Tonight, the 10-day census is 1 month old. The clock is ticking, but the board is taking no action to address the obvious implications of these numbers for next year. I would like to close with a quote from the introduction of the 1987 Long-Term Plan for School Utilization and Expansion. The Pennsylvania Economy League study concluded that the North Penn area is, quote, highly volatile in terms of potential for population growth. The data shows that by 1996, the North Penn School District will be enrolling 12,000 plus students, an increase of approximately 2,500 more above the current enrollment. The task of providing adequate educational facilities for these additional students is both challenging and awesome, end quote. For the sake of our children, I hope we as a community are up to that profound task.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Whitworth?
My name is Mary Martha Whitworth, and I'm from Talmenson Township. First, I wanted to congratulate Dr. Bond, Dr. Cahill, and all of the great teachers at North Penn High School for developing the outstanding tech prep program that was presented last Tuesday night, and also for bringing $250,000 into the district. I think they really deserve our praise for that. Secondly, I was at the high school last week. I made the mistake of going down the hallway between classes. Never go down the hallway at North Penn High School between classes. What an experience. It is so crowded that there are some times when the masses of students just gridlock. They don't move at all. To me, that is very, very dangerous and very frightening. But I have more of a concern. According to the 10-day enrollment statistics, as Mr. Anderson just said, there are 2,545 or 50 there now. The capacity of the school is 2,600. That leaves room for 50 more students. The problem is that the incoming 10th grade, who are in 9th grade now, has 140 more students than the graduating senior class. If not one more new student were to move into this area, which is highly unlikely if you drive around and see all the construction, there will be 90 students with nowhere to go next year because there's no room for them. The only viable alternative to me seems to be split sessions. One group comes to school at 6:30 in the morning, another goes home at 6:30 in the evening. Setting up split sessions is a very complicated, time-consuming, and expensive task. I have been there, I've seen it. It involves not only scheduling, but staffing, transportation, food services, sports, and extracurricular activities. My question to the board is, do you have people right now working on the plan for split sessions? Or are we going to find ourselves in July and August with no plan and nowhere to put these extra students? I would like to know if there are right now people working on a plan for having split sessions at the high school.
There are no such activities.
Do we have an alternative for where we're going to put the extra 90 students?
No.
Maybe we better not graduate 90 of the kids from 9th grade to 10th grade then, when we were to put them next year. I think we need to look into that very quickly, because if there's not room for 90 students, we have to find something to do with them next year. My second concern is last winter, this board voted for the second time to
Ms.
move...
Whitworth, could you wrap up, please?
Yes, very quickly. For the second time to move forward on building a new high school. Last month, we heard for the first time that the new high school had been put on hold last May. Mr. Allen mentioned that he didn't remember voting to stop the project. I don't remember that vote either. I'd like to know if that's district policy, to change it after it's been voted by the board. I'd like an answer.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Whitworth.
Can I have an answer?
The answer to that question is, I believe that was mentioned by Thomas Persing while he was here. He also mentioned it to me. I do believe he mentioned it to Mrs. Mengel. I believe I can say that it was not stopped, that the architect continued to work on the plans. However, Dr. Persing did mention that to more than one school board member. Thank you, Mrs. Whitworth. Mr. Hollis?
According to the PEL numbers, next year, the enrollment at the high school will finally break the record that I participated in 1975. The difference is we didn't know we were crowded. I was concerned when I learned that Mr. Landau has filed a complaint against the school district regarding the education of our special needs students. It had always been my understanding that many people actually moved into our school district because of the programs that were offered our special needs students. It has also been my experience that Dr. Clark has overseen her work with care and concern and has implemented a curriculum that meets the varied needs of the many students in the program. Later, I learned that Mr. Landau's actions were based upon a single alleged comment of one board member and after discussions with Mrs. Leahy.
That's not true.
If Mrs. Leahy had any knowledge or concern of any problems in the education of our special needs students, as a sitting board member, she had an obligation to do something herself about correcting the problem. Not doing so would be malfeasance of the duty of her office. I've never heard her raise special education as an issue. I've never heard her call for a review of our special education curriculum. She did not make calls to WNPV radio from DFW Airport regarding special education. She did not distribute letters at Little League games. She went to talk to someone outside our district. Once again, it would seem that Mrs. Leahy is not concerned with the education of our children. She is not concerned with the image of the school district. She is not concerned with casting doubt on the effective work of a gifted administrator. Her concern seems limited to her political agenda and the success of her husband's mainstream majority. Fortunately, Mrs. Leahy will be leaving our board in just a couple of months, which means she may be able to make it here for one more meeting. But the threat of tactics like this will go on if the mainstream majority is successful in November.
Correction, Mr. Landau did his suit from the Darby report, not from what I said or what I inferred or anything of that nature. And part of the Darby report included statements from Dennis Kelly and Dick Bowman. That's where that came from. So that is the clarification. Thank you.
Let's not debate. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, ma'am in the back.
My name is Linda Totten, and I'm from Montgomery Township. I just wanted to respond to the last speaker that, first of all, there were no leaflets distributed that I know about at Little League games by Mrs. Leahy. In fact, the only information I remember hearing about was at Montgomery Township Baseball Association meeting, and there were no leaflets there either. It was simply a copy of a letter written by Mr. Potash. Second clarification that I think is important to mention is that the mainstream majority is a political action committee that is chaired by John Brown. It is not Mrs. Leahy's husband's anything, and I just want to make sure that we understand that. The third thing I wanted to mention is that I too share the concerns of the prior speakers on enrollment. I'm frightened for my fifth grader because if there's been no action for the past 6 years, I'm frightened that there won't be any action for the next 6. Please, let's not let even 6 days go by without addressing this important enrollment issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Patton. Bob?
Bob Graziano from Telmenson. One thing Mr. Anderson apparently neglected to mention is that 1987 facilities report recommended against building a second high school. But the real reason I wanted to be here was one of our wonderful third grade teachers at Walton Farm, a teacher in fact who attended the Leader Teacher Institute, was in a serious car accident this past weekend. And I'd just like for all of us to have her in our prayers. Thank you.
What's that?
I don't know if I should say her name. I think it.
Thanks, Bob. Let's go around, give everyone a chance first, and then we can come back. Okay, Mr. Long, you get it. We'll get back to you, but we're going to have to wait.
I have 2 quick points, and hopefully that'll take under the 3 minutes. One of the, I'm sorry, Steve Long, Montgomery Township. Of the last school board meetings held while under the direction of our former president, Mr. Bowman, his audience of citizens appears to have been selected prior to an actual action agenda. Of those people who were invited to speak, I find it interesting that nearly half of them were not actually citizens of the North Penn area. At no time during that evening was a member of the audience given the opportunity to express their views and/or concerns, even though it was slated on the agenda. In my opinion, these actions were intolerable and smack of a power struggle by Mr. Bowman while in the midst of his resignation. Is it not the policy of the school district and/or school board to conduct its audience of citizens with actual citizens of North Penn? If that is their policy, I'm concerned as to why Mr. Bowman was permitted to hand-select his agenda. Secondly,
I'd like Ken to at least give a shot at answering that. We do have a policy, and it has to do with people writing in ahead of time. Could you just explain
School
that?
board's policy regarding the audience of citizens is that anyone who writes and we receive it 24 hours in advance will be placed on an agenda, and they're placed on an agenda for the board president in the order in which they're received. And for instance, we had no one tonight to put on such a list, but my recollection is that that night, that day, there was a long list of people who had contacted our offices and asked to be listed to speak earlier. I should note an exception, because one day we'll hear from our high school representatives who are sent here by the Student Government Association. We made a commitment to the Student Government Association at the high school some years ago that whenever our student representatives from the SGA wanted to speak to the board, they would have the courtesy of being put at the head of the list. And so far this season, they have not chosen to come forward, but I suspect that at some point they might.
Well, I guess my concern is more or less with the fact of the non-citizens.
The
So
second
even-
part,
even
I
if-
think Mr. Potash could address more eloquently than I. It's my understanding that anyone can speak at such a meeting. And since we all pay state taxes and we all pay federal taxes, and federal and state taxes come to the district, I don't think we can deny people who don't reside in the school district from speaking here. Mr. Potash, you may need to help me with that.
It's always been the policy of this district that anybody having a legitimate interest has a right to speak at this meeting.
That's certainly not a problem, but I would then question, do we not have some interest ourselves in hearing from citizens of North Penn as opposed to non-citizens? If we have 10 people and they are not from North Penn, certainly I can understand that. If you have people from North Penn and people from outside North Penn, I'd like to think we should hear from North Penn first.
If the president will allow me an editorial comment, we'll probably never have another meeting like that.
Thanks.
That's great.
All right, second, real quick. I guess something similar on the same line of that. Does the school board or school district have a policy with regard to solicitation of materials on school board property or on school district property?
You want to address that? I'll turn that over to Dr. Bose, because we've been discussing
Are you talking
that.
about political activity? No,
Yes.
there's no such policy.
Okay, there is no such policy?
That's correct.
Would it not be a good idea for perhaps someone to look into developing some sort of policy like that?
I certainly think it's worth considering.
Good.
There is a
Deals with political activity on school board property.
You can't distribute materials when you go into a grocery store, and my concern is someone's walking on school board property and they're handed a leaflet of whatever. Does that seem like the school board or school district is endorsing whatever they're handing out?
Charlie?
This topic has caused us much concern in recent years, and we have been consistent in denying no one. Dr. Bose has said we will look at that again. We have always worked under the advice of the solicitor in this regard, and surely it's been said that we will take another look.
But at this point, there isn't a policy then?
There is no policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Long.
Appreciate that, Dr.
Okay, I believe there was a hand in the back. Ma'am?
Rose Lupro, Hatfield Township. And I'm going to change totally the subject. I would like to see, in consideration for long-term planning, some type of a homework hotline. I had a daughter that was very ill for 2 weeks, and to get homework assignments in the middle school, and as you go up, it's harder and harder to get them. You have to give 2 days' notice before you can get them, and if you have a child that's, could be well the next day because she's having an asthma attack but could not and ended up being out for 2 weeks, it took me forever to get homework. And I know Solderton has a homework hotline in place. Other school districts have them. And it would just be nice to be able to call in and have a number that you dial and you find out what the homework is. And you have homework for your child that's sick or a child that does not do homework or does not want to do homework. You're able to give the teacher a hand by making sure homework is done. So I would just like that to be one of the things that is put into a plan for long-range planning, especially as you get into the middle school, because that's such an important time for our children to learn to be responsible and for us to be able to have an easy method of keeping it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Looper. Okay, Ms. Jenke?
I'm Ellen Janke from Lansdale Borough. I just have a short comment to make, and that's about our agenda. Our agenda's been extremely light the last 2 meetings, which I think this is terrific in some ways, but I think a few things have been missing from our agenda. We have an ethics code that has not come up before the board, and I've been waiting to see it, and I was hoping it was going to be on at the work session. It wasn't, so I thought, well, maybe tonight. And of course, other people have addressed the overcrowding, and I think that is definitely an issue we should have on the agenda at this time. And another thing to work on right now would be the realignment of our middle schools. Penndale is scheduled to be open September of '96, and at a time when the board agenda does not include budgetary process or other time-consuming issues, it would seem logical to me that this would be the time to address some of these things, not especially realignment too, because that always tends to cause a lot of anxiety. Why don't we start that now and not wait till later in the year? Thank you very much.
Gentleman up front, Chuck, I believe.
Good evening. I'm Chuck Hammond from Montgomery Township. I haven't had the pleasure of being in this room for a while. I sat through many budget meetings and earned income tax meetings, and I thought I left this room in good hands. But obviously the events of today in the newspaper, I guess, has pretty much capped off how I felt over the last several months. The article concerning the borough OK's anti-Mengel protest. I can having thoughts of the 1960s and 1970s, the Vietnam War and all this kind of good stuff. I'm just very concerned of where this school district and these townships have come to. I think we've reached an all-time low on where we are and of what we are as a people. I think we need to focus on where we should be going with this school district. We're $118 million in debt, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to get any better. You keep talking about building a second high school for at least another $50 million. You are very close to approaching the state top limit for what you can have for a deficit. You better start focusing on where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. This bashing of Donna Mengel has got to stop. You've got to focus on the true issues of this district. A couple of years ago, we voted for 4 people to mandate the fact that we did not want to spend additional monies. We did not want to waste tax dollars. We wanted to get a quality education for the dollars that we had to spend. This is what we wanted. This is what we've elected Vicki Shear, Tom Clemens, Donna Mengel, and Terry Prykowski for. I would like to publicly thank the 4 of you for at least trying to do that over the last 2-year period. I would suggest that the candidates that are now on board, that are now running for the school board, in fact, concentrate on the real issues and get a life, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hey, gentleman up front. We'll get back to you, Greg.
Yeah, Adam Rosenthal, Lansdale. You want my address also?
No, Lansdale's fine.
Okay. Mrs. Janke mentioned something about board policy on racial, ethnic, and social slurs, and I have an agenda. I'm the school board liaison with, I have a partner also, but we get our agenda a few days in advance. And this one says that there was going to be a reading of the board policy 8102, racial, ethnic, and social slurs. And so I mentioned it the other day at a house meeting, and we had a big debate about it, and I was just wondering, is there going to be a time when you are going to mention that? Because they really wanted to know about that.
The policy got pulled off.
I'd like to comment, and I believe I have the floor first, Mrs. Leahy.
I was the liaison person.
Yes, you were, but I pulled the policy, and I would like to comment on that, sir. First of all, I'd like to correct Mrs. Janke. She made the comment that it was a code of ethics policy, and the fact of the matter is that this board voted on, let me pull the minutes from that meeting, we voted on to adopt a policy against hate speech and group defamation. I do believe that that appears on the agenda that you have there. As president, I met with our superintendent, Dr. Bose, and we discussed that issue in length. What's important to point out is at the same time that night at that meeting, which I must say it was a long meeting that night. At that same time, we also voted to develop due process for board members and other people within the education community. It was my decision to pull that from the agenda due to the fact that we did not discuss it at a work session. That's the proper place for that policy to appear, and I did send a memo out to the school board members that we plan to attach that to our work session for the month of November to discuss it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay? Thank you. Okay, gentleman in the back.
Walter Kuzma, Tolmanson Township. First of all, it's a little late, but I would like to congratulate the 5 school board members that voted Bill Roman in as the interim school board director. If they take advantage of his financial expertise, I think they've got a lot to learn. Another thing, are we $5 million in debt on all the new construction that's going on, which I had read in the Times Herald last Sunday or so?
Since Dennis isn't here, would you like to try to answer that, Vicki?
At the last board meeting, it was discussed when we received the report on the Pendale projects that we would need to borrow $5 million, Walter, in order to complete the projects that we're encumbered with now and be able to wrap those projects up at the, given what we expect those to cost as the way Pendale's progressing. So as it was, Dennis said he would expect that we would need to move forward and secure that additional financing by May.
May, yes.
So we will be having it on the agenda somewhere in between now and then to decide how we're going to deal with this.
We have to borrow $5 million more to complete the projects?
The options were either that or we would have to find means through the budget, which would be very difficult, I would say, to be able to create a $5 million gain there.
Do they?
And, or he mentioned the sale of the land.
Do they make plans to do all the renovations and then they talk about borrowing the money, or are you going to borrow the money first and then do the renovations?
I understand your concern, Walter, because actually that was one of the reasons why I asked for the Pendale project to be updated so we could find out exactly where we're standing. Unfortunately, the bids have gone out. Otherwise, perhaps the board could have had an opportunity to take a second look at the renovations to see if there's any way to lower the renovation costs. But we are going to be obligated to meet those bids and those commitments.
Mr. Walter, we discussed that at the work session, and we will be discussing it in future sessions on how we're going to accomplish this.
Are you going to inform the people about it?
At the last session we did, and we plan to keep informing the people, yes.
Okay. And the other thing is that in that same article, there was one good piece in there, and I think Artwood needs to be congratulated because your renovations are 15 to 20% ahead of schedule. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Ma'am in the front.
Dorothy Curry Lansdale, a few laurels and a few darts. I'd certainly like to congratulate our many fine students at the high school who were honored here tonight, and those who were not able to make it, plus not only our commended students, but also our other fine academic students, and also commendations to the many fine staff members who have worked with them over the years. Thank you. Now, darts. At last month's meeting, a new member was selected to sit on this board. As I'm certain all of you are aware, the one direct way that the people or the residents of a school district under the school laws of Pennsylvania have of being directly associated or to be able to directly impact on education in the district is the election of a school board member. And then I realized, when a seat becomes vacant, of course, there is the vehicle for filling that seat by the current sitting board members. However, never in all my years in the North Penn School District have I seen a selection done behind so many closed doors and in such secrecy. Number one, after asking people to come forward. You didn't even have the courtesy to contact them or interview them. You had no public discussion whatsoever of the process you intended to use to fill that seat. And then, alas, you didn't even have the courtesy to put the item on the agenda. And last, but certainly not least, when asked the question about would this be voted on by a member of the audience, at that point in time, surely, Mr. President, you knew the item was going to come up under other business. But no, even then you evaded the question, well, I think it might come up. This is not the proper way to conduct the public's business, especially from you, and as someone here in the audience stated, they voted Mangle, Scheer, Prykowski, and you, Mr. Clemens, to save them tax dollars. The four of you have been ranting and railing about, openness and closed-door meetings, and you're opposed to closed-door meetings. Well, the first thing you do when you assume the chair is close the process. I think it's called hypocrisy, and that's pretending to be what one isn't or pretending to support something that one doesn't really support. I hope you're going to clean up your act, and I hope you're going to open up the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Sandy Corum from Upper Gwinnett Township. I wasn't planning on standing up here and speaking today because I really did have enough grief and aggravation for my week. But I was sitting there and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. It seems that some people don't have a problem how we settled school teachers' contract behind closed doors. They were all for it. They stood up in mass numbers, cheered, then walked out because they didn't want to hear how the rest of their money was going to be spent. Now all of a sudden we have a problem with a board member that's only going to be here for a few months. All of a sudden there's a problem with it. If you have a problem with it, it should always be a problem, not just when your group doesn't like it. That's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Allen.
I'll be very brief. Ellen Allen from Hatfield Township. This is more or less a personal plea. In less than a month, we have an election coming up. Recently, I attended a meeting where I directed a question to 5 possible candidates for school board, and I'm not going to ask that question tonight. I'm just going to pose that same question to our group. This is not just to the school board candidates. This is to our entire working group here on the whole. I heard this question raised, I think, by our first speaker tonight. It was Mr. Taylor. I would like to see that this group would put together as your first effort, come January, some good group working conditions. I think it should be first and foremost on your list. We work with our children day to day with peer mentoring, conflict resolution, and it goes in the schools every day. We have counselors working, we have teachers implementing it. They're teaching the parents how they're doing it with the children. I use statements, reflective listening, and we can't do it here. The behavior that we're modeling is scary. And I'm coming to you with a plea. I don't care what that costs, because if that doesn't get done, nothing else is going to get accomplished. There's a lot ahead of us here. We have a long-range planning in place, hopefully, by September of '96. How are people going to sit at a table and work that out if we can't even work as a group? And I just mean as on the whole. We've got to learn to be objective with one another, and I know it's difficult because of past history. We all have to learn as adults to let go of some of that and move forward, please. Come January, please.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons.
My name is Joe Hauska. I've been a tax-paying homeowner in Tolmenson Township since 1959. I presently feel that I'm on the age of Alzheimer's, but I have some recollections. I was often wondered many years ago why a school board found it necessary to spin off some buildings, school buildings, and I believe this was one of them. And I can understand why since then my tax dollars has gone up because I had to pay for new buildings to be built. And as I look at my tomorrows, the question comes up, do we need another high school or a high school addition? When I came out of the service, universities were erecting Quonset huts to teach college courses to GIs to fulfill a surge of student enrollment at that time, and that seemed to take care of a problem which didn't last long. Now, as I read the North Bend Reporter, I'm concerned that if I vote a certain way, I become a bigot. When I was growing up a little kid, I was called a dumb Polak, but my father told me, don't worry about that, Joey, because you're a chuckling Czech. So that was good. And now I see that a lot of information is being published in newspapers that a certain board member here, the presence is disruptive to a smooth functioning board, and I don't know what that really means. But as I look at the name tags of the people here, and by the way, when Reverend Schuler uses this podium as a pulpit, I have to wonder, had he been present when the school board, all 9 members, voted unanimously to condemn a statement, whatever its source. And I think that should be sufficient for someone to carry a banner with the word tolerance in it and instead go around preaching and practicing intolerance. So anyhow, as I look at the name tags here, I would like to associate that with what our present school board needs. So I would begin by saying D, demand quality education. M, maintain budget scrutiny. E, examine bond profiteering. N, nurse tax dollars. G, get competitive bids. E, another E, expand student activities. L, limit teacher raises. Thank you.
Ma'am in the back.
Hi, Eileen McMullen from Lansdale. I'd like to ask a question. Do we have any numbers on enrollment beyond the year 2005? The Pell?
2005, I'm not sure what the Pell is.
I've never seen
I mean, we're all still spinning wheels on a high school that we only have information on 10 years of figures on, and to me that seems a little short-sighted. And I just wonder if there's some way we could go beyond to maybe a 20-year study.
Tom, I do know there was a request that we were informed that actually at no extra cost that they were able to go out to a 15-year, but the accuracy in the margin of error.
We chose not to follow through on that.
Okay, I thought we were going to.
PEL does have that available to us.
That just seems a little short-sighted at this point. Another thing, in lieu of, I get a lot of people coming up here and criticizing and talking about things that aren't being done, but no real help. I would like to encourage the audience to bring up a little bit more suggestive information to help the school board members to do their job. I don't know, when the PEL guy was here, I had asked questions about enrollment discrepancies and figure discrepancies, and he wasn't sure why. And I thought I could pinpoint his kindergarten, first grade discrepancies because of the daycare thing with the mothers now, and he had no answer for that. And I would like to look at that maybe towards a short-term solution for our elementary overcrowding. How many mothers work and their kids are in daycare anyway, and at 5 years switch them over to our kindergartens? My daughter will be in the same daycare for kindergarten where she will have a class of maybe 10, 12. Numbers are good. I bet every mother would want their kindergarten child to have 10 to 12 in their class. And it will cost me no more as regular daycare. Before and after school care for a kindergartner probably is going to cost the same as my child all day. Is there any way we can encourage mothers to keep their children in the daycare? Most of these kindergartens are licensed by the state of Pennsylvania. And the only thing missing there would be incentive. Maybe there would be some sort of tax break or subsidy we could give parents to keep their children in the daycare center for kindergarten, which many of our private daycare centers provide, opening up some classrooms that are now being used for kindergarten. Just a thought. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we come back to Mr. Anderson? Okay, seeing none, come on up, Greg. For 5 seconds.
One more inaccuracy came up, and since Mr. Kelly's not here, I'd like to correct it because I'm sure he would if he had been here. One gentleman stated that our outstanding indebtedness is $118 million. I'm sure Mr. Kelly would be happy to correct him that it is $74 million and not $118 million.
That's incorrect. That's incorrect.
Our outstanding principal is $74 million.
Principal, outstanding debt is $117 million.
Mrs. Sure, if you take out a mortgage for $100,000, you don't say that your mortgage is $250,000 just because that's the sum of the payments you'll have to make over 30 years.
When I asked Dennis the difference between the language and the numbers being out there, he said that our outstanding indebtedness would be $117 million. Our outstanding principal was
That is
standing
true.
at
That is true, Mrs.
Dennis
Sherrill.
isn't here. Let's not debate.
Okay. That is true, Mrs. Sherrill. That is our outstanding total debt service, inclusive of the interest. Our limit on bond principal is 2.5 times our local revenue, which is $80 million this year. So we could borrow up to $200 million before the state got us in trouble, but I wouldn't recommend we get anywhere close to that. I really wanted to correct Mr. Graziano. I have a copy of the study that he said makes recommendations, and I would be happy to allow him to look through this. This is not an action document. It was simply a set of alternatives, implications. It offered 4 options, 2 of which included building a new junior high school, 1 of which included a renovation of the junior high and an expansion to the senior high, and the 4th of which did include the opportunity to build an additional high school facility. So those options have always been under consideration, and I will be happy to let him have a look through it as long as he returns it at the end of the session. But this was simply a set of possible recommendations and was never actually acted upon by the board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. You haven't had a chance yet. Come on up, Karen.
Karen Clark, Montgomery Township. I'm the one who found the long-range plan several months ago. And inside that long-range plan, it has advantages and disadvantages under each of those options. On the option that includes a second high school, there are no advantages written down. There are disadvantages.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Any other questions, comments? Okay, that'll end the audience of citizens. Moving on to item 6, I'll turn it over to our superintendent.
Mr. President, members of the board, it is recommended you approve the traditional waiver of tuition status for the students who are listed according to board policy and on record in the Office of Special Education and Student Services.
So moved. So moved by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Roman. Questions or comments?
Just how many? I prefer be at least
2. How many? 2.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
The next item is the recommendation that comes out of the conversation that the board held at its last working session, where we are recommending that the board direct the superintendent to establish a long-range planning process to present to the board in December for the board's approval. And that process will include a completion deadline targeting September of '96 for the development of a long-range plan, then subject again to the board's approval once complete. It's recommended you take this action and give us those marching orders.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mrs. Scher, second by Mr. Roman. Questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
And the next item, members of the board, is again a matter familiar to you. As you remember, this was a presentation made by Dr. Bond. It is your granting the school district officials authority to receive a Goals 2000 grant for primarily text prep development. in the sum of $250,000. It's recommended that you approve that.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Scher, seconded by Ms. Prokowski. Questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
The next item is transportation contracts negotiated for this current school year and listed as a reference for you in item 9395. It is recommended that you approve these contracts.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Prokowski,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Scher. Questions or comments?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Fred, I guess, be directed at you. Did you say it's a contract for the 95-96 year, but do we have options if we were to be changing services? Is there any possibility of Ryder picking up some of these transportation areas at a cheaper rate than what we're paying through the specialized service that we're using now, since they are private?
Vicki, I guess that's always a possibility, but I think we'd really have to take a long, hard look at exactly how many kids we're talking about, where they are, because Ryder's not cheap either.
True. Okay, I just wanted to know if there was still any opening, though, for us to...
Yeah, most of these, by the way, are handicapped youngsters.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
The next recommendation has already been mentioned. In fact, it was introduced by Mrs. Scheer in her financial report. This is a resolution to approve refunding to the Windsor Corporation. It has to do with an interpretation of the sale of the Wanamaker property as not being a sale but a transfer, and the owners are entitled to the refund of $26,000 plus and a refund to MBL Life Assurance Corporation, again an entitlement to which they've made a request for refund. It's recommended that you approve the refunds.
I so move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Roman, seconded by Mrs. Scher. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
The next recommendation, Mr. President, members of the board, are the gifts given to schools identified in this report for the items listed. As you will see, many of them, or most of them, are technology-related gifts that require your approval to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Allen, seconded by Mrs. Scher. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
And again, the next item is the award of a bid for the purchase of a truck for use by the school district. And you'll note that there's a low bid exception made, and I'm sure Mr. Wood will be able to answer any questions if you have any beyond that explanation.
Let's have a motion first.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Allen, seconded by Mr. Roman. Questions or comments on the motion from Mr. Wood? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
The next item, again, you might want to consider these as a group on personnel recommendations that involve appointments of two individuals in 6H1A, two individual appointments, professional staff.
6H1, okay, just for those two. Okay, we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Mingle, seconded by Ms. Prokowski. Okay, we're voting on 6-1A. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
The next group of personnel, again, for your approval to appoint, would be 9 support staff.
Moved by Mr. Reckamp.
Second.
Second by Ms. Prokowski. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
Then there are 2 employees who are separating by resignation from employment by the school district. We recommend you accept those resignations.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Allen, second by Ms. Prokowski. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
Among the personnel considerations are the consideration that salary changes for 2 support staff as noted be approved by your action.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Reckamp, second by Mr. Roman. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
There is 1 leave of absence on a part of a professional employee that is recommended for your approval.
So moved.
It's an unpaid leave.
Moved by Mr. Reckamp, seconded by Mr. White. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Dr. Rose, I would just like to correct
I don't
that. That's
understand.
non-professional.
1 second.
That is non-professional.
I was going to,
Right,
my question,
okay.
I was
We stand corrected.
We stand corrected.
Thank you.
Non-professional.
Right, support staff.
Support staff, yes.
Right, we're both looking at them, saying, since when are
We have that.
custodians in our union?
Item now, A reads,
We
4A
put
reads.
testers in every once in a while.
Just to see if we're awake. Okay.
4A reads support staff. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
Also brought to your attention for your approval would be the appointments of certain support staff, professional and support staff substitutes to be used during the current school year.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Reckamp. Second by Mr. Whites. Are there any potential conflicts? We okay? Okay, any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
There's 1 recommendation for 1 professional employee for a salary change due to a preparation level increase. That's recommended for your approval also.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Reckamp, second by Mr. Whites. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
The next item is an update of additions and deletions to certain extra duty assignments for staff as presented for your approval.
Moved by Mr. Reckamp, second by Mr. Whites. Questions or comments on this item? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
There are a number of travel requests that involve staff and students, all of which are from North Penn High School, and you may wish to consider moving them as a whole.
I would so move the entire group.
Okay, move this entire group, second by Mr., I'm sorry. Motion made by Mr. Reckamp, seconded by Mr. Roman. Question or comments on voting it for the whole group?
Do it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
And lastly, Mr. President, I call to your attention and the board's attention those information items that are presented to you for your general knowledge.
Any comments or questions on item J? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 7, other business. Anybody have anything for other business? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 8, treasurer's report. I believe Mrs. Scher has a report.
In Dennis's absence, I will first give the report on treasurers, the monthly meeting of the Board of School Directors. That the financial reports for the month of September 1995, cash receipts for September 1995, $31,416,097.30. Cash receipts year-to-date is $70,798,520.89. Cash disbursements, $14,680,952.26. Cash disbursements year-to-date, $26,279,997.99. And our total investments for August, $55,014,562.40. I recommend the approval for the checks sanctioned for the month of September 1995 in the amount of $14,482,057.63.
Okay, we've heard a report and a recommendation. Is there a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Mrs. Scher, seconded by Mr. Allen. Any questions on the financial report?
That's it. Take that.
Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Okay, I recommend approval for the check disbursements for the month of October 1995 in the amount of $453,701.03.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Mengel, seconded by Mr. Roman. Questions or comments?
A question, you normally come out with the sanctions and the...
They were 2 different months, Ron.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Okay. And activity in the North Penn School District food service account for the month of September 1995 was as follows. Total income was $332,749.95. Raw food cost was $139,768.58. Gross profit on sales was $192,981.37. Total operating cost was $246,941.02. Net loss for September 1995, I have a negative $53,959.65 with the same amount as the net loss year-to-date. We'll have Dennis explain that next month.
It usually explains that by some certain month it starts catching back.
Right, certainly, we do go through that after we get started up, and because you have so much of a cash outlay for your inventory, which isn't yet caught up through sales.
Bill, did you comment?
Yeah, I have a question. Where do we account for the surplus from last year's budget in the food service?
In the food service, it comes forward. You will find it at the beginning, that you will have a carryover. Now, there are investments.
Is that part of the?
Yes. Right.
You mentioned an income. You didn't.
The total income, that was the total income, but then your net balance was the negative $53,959 because of the beginning income versus what we've had to put out into operating costs to date in inventory.
When we do that final number, does that take into account the balance that was brought forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Dan.
Vicki, did you have anything else for item 9 or 10?
No, sorry, lost track here with Bill, but that's the end of that report. That's all Dennis has forwarded, and that should cover everything.
Anybody have any other questions to pass on? We can pass on to Dennis for items 9 or 10. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 11, federal programs. Dr. Bose.
No report.
Okay, moving on. Any questions, comments anyway? Hearing none, moving on to solicitor's report.
No report.
Okay, is there a move for adjournment?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Redcamp, second by Mrs. Sherwood. I'm sorry, by Ms. Mengel, we're adjourned.